On a chilly autumn morning, the streets of London buzzed with energy. Tourists from all over the world milled about, snapping photos and marveling at the grandeur of Buckingham Palace. The golden hues of fall leaves swirled in the breeze, adding charm to the iconic scene. Amidst the crowd stood Jack Thompson, an elderly man whose presence seemed to carry a quiet weight. His faded military uniform, though worn and patched in places, spoke volumes about his past. Rows of medals gleamed faintly on his chest, each one telling a story of bravery, sacrifice, and years spent far from home. Jack moved slowly, leaning slightly on his cane as he navigated the throng of people. Despite his age, there was a certain determination in his steps, a sense of purpose that made him stand out among the sea of tourists. He paused for a moment, gazing up at the palace gates where the royal guard stood tall and motionless. Their bright red tunics and towering bearskin hats were unmistakable symbols of tradition and discipline. To most people, they looked like statues, untouchable figures frozen in time. But not to Jack. For him, these guards represented something deeper: duty, loyalty, and service to a greater cause. As he drew closer, memories flooded his mind. Memories of battles fought, comrades lost, and nights spent under starlit skies, wondering if he'd ever see home again. Shaking off the wave of nostalgia, Jack stopped directly in front of one of the guards. This particular soldier, Corporal Daniel Hughes, stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed straight ahead as protocol demanded. For a brief moment, Jack hesitated. He wasn't sure why he had come here today, or what he hoped to achieve. But deep down, he felt compelled to do something, to bridge the gap between his generation and this young guard who now carried the torch of service. Slowly, deliberately, Jack raised his trembling right hand to his forehead in a crisp salute. It was a gesture steeped in respect, gratitude, and perhaps even longing for the days when such acts of honor felt more common. The crowd around them barely noticed. Most were too busy taking selfies or chatting excitedly about their day. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves, pointing at the guards with wide-eyed curiosity. Vendors sold hot drinks nearby, their cheerful calls blending into the hum of activity. Yet for Jack and the Royal Guard, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. As Jack held his salute, Corporal Hughes's gaze flickered downward for the briefest instant. Their eyes met, and in that fleeting connection, something unspoken passed between them. It was a shared understanding, a recognition of sacrifices made and burdens carried. Though no words were exchanged, both men knew they belonged to a brotherhood forged by service, even if separated by decades. The air grew heavier with anticipation. Would the guard respond? Or would he remain steadfast, adhering to the rigid rules that governed his role? Jack lowered his hand slowly, unsure of what would happen next. Around them, life continued as usual, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding at the palace gates. Little did anyone know, this seemingly ordinary encounter was about to become extraordinary, a moment that would touch hearts and remind everyone present of the true meaning of honor. As the seconds ticked by, the atmosphere around Jack and the Royal Guard seemed to shift ever so slightly. The crowd remained largely unaware of the emotional undercurrents swirling between the elderly veteran and Corporal Daniel Hughes. But then something extraordinary happened, something that would defy tradition and leave an indelible mark on everyone who witnessed it. Corporal Hughes, whose training had drilled into him the importance of maintaining composure at all times, felt a tug in his chest. He couldn't explain it. A mix of respect, admiration, and perhaps even personal connection. But he knew he couldn't let this moment pass without acknowledging it. Slowly, deliberately, he moved. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. Rather, it was subtle yet unmistakable. His rifle, which had been resting against his shoulder, shifted slightly as he adjusted its position. Then, breaking rank, he stepped forward just enough to make eye contact with Jack once more. The movement was slight, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye, but it carried immense weight. For years, people had marveled at the stoicism of the Queen's guards, their unwavering posture, their refusal to react to distractions or disruptions. Children often tried to make them laugh. Tourists waved wildly, and some even dressed up in silly costumes to elicit a reaction. Yet here was Corporal Hughes, stepping outside the boundaries of protocol for a man he didn't know but deeply respected. With precision and grace, Daniel raised his hand in a crisp salute. It wasn't rushed or casual. It was measured, deliberate, and filled with meaning. His fingers pressed firmly against his forehead, and his arm formed a perfect angle. To anyone watching closely, it was clear this wasn't just any salute. It was one born out of genuine gratitude, a silent acknowledgement of the sacrifices Jack had made long before Daniel was even born. The crowd, initially distracted by the usual hustle and bustle, began to take notice. A young woman holding her phone paused mid-video, her eyes widening as she realized what was happening. An older man standing nearby whispered to his wife, "Did you see that?" He broke rank. Others turned their heads, curiosity piqued by the unusual interaction. The murmurs grew louder, spreading like ripples in a pond. Some gasped audibly, while others pointed excitedly. Parents hushed their children, urging them to pay attention to the unfolding scene. Even the other royal guards, though trained to remain expressionless, seemed to stiffen ever so slightly, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. No one dared to interrupt. Instead, they watched in awe as two men from different generations connected through a simple yet profound act of mutual respect. For Jack, the gesture was overwhelming. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. Tears welled up in his eyes, blurring his vision. He hadn't expected this. Not here, not today. All he had wanted was to pay his respects, to offer a small token of gratitude to those who now stood guard over the freedoms he and his comrades had fought for. But this was more than he could have imagined. Daniel held the salute for several seconds longer than necessary, ensuring that Jack understood the depth of his appreciation. When he finally lowered his hand, the silence around them was palpable. It was as though the entire world had paused to honor the bond between these two men, one who had served in battles long past, and another who now stood as a symbol of continuity and commitment. What happened next would bring everyone to tears, not just because of the emotions on display, but because of the powerful reminder that humanity can shine brightest when we choose to break rules for the sake of compassion and respect. As the salute lingered in the air, time seemed to slow down. The bustling city around them faded into the background, leaving only Jack and Corporal Daniel Hughes at the center of this quiet yet monumental moment. Daniel's salute hadn't just been a gesture. It was a bridge spanning decades, connecting two lives shaped by service and sacrifice. But he wasn't done yet. Leaning forward ever so slightly, Daniel broke another unspoken rule. He spoke. His voice was low, barely audible over the distant chatter of the crowd, but it carried a weight that resonated deeply. "Thank you, sir," he said, his tone steady but tinged with emotion. "We owe you everything." The words were simple, yet they held the power of an entire generation's gratitude. Jack froze, his breath catching in his throat. He had spent years carrying the memories of war, the camaraderie, the loss, the sleepless nights, but rarely had anyone expressed their thanks so directly, so personally. For a man who had always put others before himself, hearing those words felt like lifting a burden he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. His weathered face softened, and his shoulders slumped just a fraction as the weight of suppressed emotions began to surface. Tears welled up in Jack's eyes, glistening against the morning light. He blinked rapidly, trying to hold them back, but it was no use. A single tear rolled down his cheek, tracing the lines etched by age and hardship. Unable to speak, he simply nodded, his chin trembling slightly. It was a nod filled with understanding, pride, and perhaps even relief. A silent confirmation that his sacrifices had not been forgotten. The connection between the two men was palpable. Though separated by decades, they shared a bond that transcended time. Jack had fought in trenches and endured battles under skies lit by artillery fire, while Daniel now stood guard in ceremonial finery, protecting the peace Jack and his comrades had helped secure. Yet in that moment, their roles felt intertwined, as if the torch of duty had been passed seamlessly from one hand to another. The crowd, which had grown quieter with each passing second, seemed to sense the gravity of what was unfolding. Parents instinctively pulled their children closer, whispering explanations about the significance of the moment. Strangers exchanged glances, some wiping away tears of their own. Even the other royal guards, though trained to remain stoic, appeared to stand a little taller, their presence bolstered by the raw humanity on display. For Jack, this encounter was more than just a salute or a few heartfelt words. It was validation, a reminder that his efforts, and those of his fellow soldiers, had mattered. It was easy to feel forgotten when years had passed and the world moved on, but here was a young guard ensuring that the past would never be erased. And for Daniel, it was a chance to honor not just Jack, but every veteran who had paved the way for the freedoms he now protected. As the moment stretched on, neither man moved immediately. They simply stood there, locked in a shared understanding that needed no further explanation. The noise of the city slowly crept back in, the hum of conversations, the click of cameras, the rustle of leaves. But it felt distant, almost irrelevant. What mattered most was happening right here, in this fleeting exchange between two souls united by service. When Jack finally took a small step back, breaking the spell, the crowd erupted into spontaneous applause. But neither Jack nor Daniel seemed to hear it. They were still caught in the aftermath of their shared moment, each carrying a renewed sense of purpose. Little did they know, this interaction would ripple outward, touching countless lives and reminding the world of the enduring power of gratitude and respect. The ripple effect of the moment between Jack and Corporal Daniel Hughes began almost immediately. As the salute ended and Jack took a small step back, the crowd, initially hushed in awe, erupted into spontaneous applause. It started with one person, perhaps a mother clutching her child's hand, who began clapping softly. Then another joined in, then another, until the sound grew into a thunderous ovation that echoed down the mall. At first, it was tentative, a few scattered claps. But as more people realized the significance of what they had just witnessed, the applause became overwhelming. Strangers exchanged glances, their faces lit with admiration and emotion. Some wiped tears from their eyes, while others raised their phones to capture the scene, though no video could truly convey the depth of feeling in the air. A young woman standing nearby turned to her companion, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Do you see this? This is why we remember." Her words carried across to those around her, and soon nods of agreement rippled through the gathering. Parents knelt beside their children, explaining the importance of honoring veterans like Jack and respecting traditions upheld by soldiers like Daniel. For many, this wasn't just a heartwarming moment. It was a lesson in gratitude and history. Among the spectators was an elderly man wearing a faded Royal Air Force cap, his own medals pinned proudly to his jacket. He stood tall, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the scene unfold with glistening eyes. When the applause reached its crescendo, he stepped forward, raising his own hand in a crisp salute toward Jack. One by one, other veterans in the crowd followed suit. Within moments, a sea of salutes stretched out before Jack, each one a silent tribute to his service and sacrifice. The energy was electric, infectious even. People who had been complete strangers minutes ago now embraced as if they were old friends. A teenage boy approached Jack hesitantly, extending his hand. "Thank you, sir," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. Jack smiled faintly, shaking the boy's hand before patting him gently on the shoulder. It was a gesture that spoke volumes, a passing of respect, not just between generations, but also between individuals. Even the usually stoic royal guards seemed affected. Though they remained at their posts, their rigid stances softened ever so slightly. One guard, positioned farther down the line, glanced at Daniel and gave an almost imperceptible nod, a quiet acknowledgement of what his fellow soldier had done. In that subtle exchange, there was unity, a shared understanding that sometimes bending the rules can uphold something far greater than tradition. As the applause continued, someone shouted, "3 cheers for the heroes." The call was met with resounding agreement. Hip, hip, hooray, rang out 3 times, the cheers growing louder with each repetition. Tourists waved their flags, locals cheered, and even street vendors paused their work to join in. It was a celebration, not of victory or conquest, but of humanity, connection, and the enduring spirit of service. For Jack, the attention was humbling. He hadn't sought recognition. All he wanted was to pay his respects. Yet here he was, surrounded by strangers whose lives he had unknowingly touched. His chest swelled with pride, not for himself, but for the collective memory of every soldier who had served alongside him. And for Daniel, seeing the crowd's reaction reinforced his belief that compassion could transcend protocol. By the time the applause began to fade, the mood had shifted entirely. What had started as an ordinary morning outside Buckingham Palace had transformed into something extraordinary, a moment of unity and reflection that would stay with everyone present for years to come. As Jack turned to leave, walking slowly but with renewed strength, the crowd parted respectfully, creating a path lined with smiles, waves, and murmurs of gratitude. Little did anyone know, this was only the beginning of a story that would touch hearts far beyond London's streets. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, news of the extraordinary encounter between Jack Thompson and Corporal Daniel Hughes had spread like wildfire. Journalists, always on the lookout for human interest stories, scrambled to piece together the details of what had happened outside Buckingham Palace earlier that day. Within hours, reporters tracked down both men, eager to learn more about the poignant moment that had captivated not just a crowd, but an entire city. Jack, still wearing his faded military uniform, sat in a modest armchair at his small flat in East London. His medals lay neatly arranged on the coffee table in front of him, each one telling a story of battles fought and sacrifices made. When asked why he had gone to the palace that morning, Jack's voice softened. "I didn't plan anything," he admitted, his hands clasped tightly around a cup of tea. "I just wanted to pay my respects, to remember those who didn't make it home. I never expected. Well, what happened with the guard?" He paused, his gaze drifting to the window as if reliving the moment. "That young man. He reminded me of myself when I was his age. Full of hope, full of duty, but he also reminded me of how much we owe to those who came before us. It wasn't just his salute, it was the way he looked at me, like he truly understood." Meanwhile, Corporal Hughes found himself sitting under bright studio lights for an interview later that evening. Dressed in his formal uniform, he spoke with humility, explaining his decision to break protocol. "My grandfather served in World War II," Daniel revealed, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "He used to tell me stories about the men he served with, the friends he lost. He always said we should never forget them. When I saw Mr. Thompson standing there, saluting me with all those medals on his chest, I thought of my granddad. I couldn't let him walk away without showing my respect." Daniel went on to explain that while discipline and tradition were cornerstones of his role as a royal guard, they weren't meant to overshadow humanity. Rules are important. They keep us grounded. But sometimes you have to look beyond them and see the person in front of you. That's what I tried to do. As their stories unfolded, the public response was overwhelming. Social media platforms buzzed with reactions, photos, and videos from the scene. People shared memories of their own loved ones who had served, posting pictures of grandparents, parents, or siblings in uniform. Hashtags like #RespectForHeroes and #NeverForget began trending globally, sparking conversations about the importance of remembering veterans and honoring their sacrifices. Veterans organizations seized the opportunity to highlight the ongoing needs of former service members. Charities dedicated to supporting veterans saw a surge in donations, with many contributors citing Jack and Daniel's story as inspiration. Schools incorporated the incident into lessons about history, gratitude, and civic responsibility, encouraging students to write letters of thanks to veterans in their communities. Even celebrities joined in, using their platforms to amplify the message. Actors, musicians, and athletes posted heartfelt tributes, praising both Jack's quiet dignity and Daniel's compassionate defiance of protocol. One famous actor tweeted, "This is what true honor looks like. Two generations connecting through service, sacrifice, and respect." For Jack and Daniel, however, the attention was bittersweet. Both men expressed discomfort with being labeled heroes. Jack insisted that the real heroes were the ones who hadn't returned from war, while Daniel emphasized that he was simply doing what felt right in the moment. Despite their modesty, their actions resonated deeply, reminding people of the enduring power of gratitude and connection. As days turned into weeks, invitations poured in for the two men to speak at events, attend ceremonies, and meet others who had been inspired by their story. They accepted some but declined many, preferring to keep their lives simple. Still, neither could deny the impact of that fateful morning, a moment that had started as a quiet salute but had grown into something far greater, a symbol of unity, remembrance, and the timeless bond of service. In the weeks that followed, the story of Jack Thompson and Corporal Daniel Hughes became a beacon of hope and unity in a world often divided by differences. The image of an elderly war veteran saluting a royal guard, and the guard stepping out of line to return the honor, resonated deeply with people from all walks of life. It wasn't just a moment, it was a movement, sparking conversations about gratitude, sacrifice, and the importance of remembering those who serve. Jack and Daniel found themselves thrust into the spotlight, attending events they never imagined they'd be part of. From charity galas to community gatherings, the two men stood side by side, sharing their experiences and encouraging others to reflect on the values that had brought them together: service, respect, and humanity. At one event, a young girl no older than 10 approached Jack timidly, holding out a handmade card decorated with stars and stripes. "Thank you for protecting us," she whispered before running back to her parents. Jack's eyes welled up as he held the card close, touched by the innocence and sincerity of the gesture. Their appearances weren't limited to formal settings. They visited schools, where students eagerly listened to their stories. Jack spoke of the camaraderie among soldiers during wartime, the laughter shared in foxholes, the quiet moments under starlit skies, and the heartache of losing friends. His words painted vivid pictures of both the horrors and the humanity of war. Meanwhile, Daniel talked about his role as a modern-day soldier, emphasizing the importance of carrying forward the legacy of those who came before him. Together, they created a bridge between generations, showing young minds that courage and compassion are timeless qualities. The media played a significant role in spreading their message. Footage of their encounter outside Buckingham Palace went viral, racking up millions of views online. News outlets around the world featured their story, dubbing it "the salute heard round the world." Documentaries were made, books were written, and even filmmakers began discussing the possibility of turning their tale into a movie. Yet despite the growing fame, Jack and Daniel remained humble, always deflecting praise onto the broader community of veterans and active duty personnel. One particularly moving tribute came when a group of artists unveiled a mural dedicated to the pair. Painted on a wall in central London, the artwork depicted Jack and Daniel standing face to face, their salutes frozen in time against a backdrop of poppies, a symbol of remembrance. Passers-by stopped to admire the piece, leaving flowers and handwritten notes at its base. "You've reminded us what true honor looks like," read one note, signed simply, "A Grateful Citizen." As their bond deepened, Jack and Daniel became unlikely symbols of unity. In a time when political tensions ran high and societal divides seemed insurmountable, their story offered a glimmer of hope. People saw in them a reminder that, despite our differences, we are all connected by shared values and emotions. Their mutual respect transcended age, rank, and circumstance, proving that even the smallest gestures can have the biggest impact. When asked about breaking protocol, Daniel smiled warmly, his answer reflecting the wisdom he had gained through this experience. Rules exist for a reason. They provide structure and discipline. But sometimes you have to trust your instincts and do what feels right. That day, I felt it was more important to honor Mr. Thompson than to stick rigidly to tradition. For Jack, the entire experience was humbling. He often said that he hadn't sought recognition, but if his moment with Daniel inspired others to remember and appreciate veterans, then it was worth every bit of attention. "It's not about me," he would say. "It's about everyone who served, everyone who gave their all. If this helps keep their memory alive, then I'm happy." What started as a simple salute had grown into something far greater, a testament to the enduring power of gratitude, connection, and the unbreakable bonds forged through service. And though neither man could predict what lay ahead, one thing was certain: their story would continue to inspire for years to come. Years passed, but the story of Jack Thompson and Corporal Daniel Hughes only grew stronger in the hearts of those who had witnessed it, both in person and through the countless retellings that followed. Their moment outside Buckingham Palace became more than just a memory. It evolved into a symbol of unity, respect, and the enduring legacy of service. As time went on, their bond continued to inspire people around the world, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness can leave an indelible mark. Jack and Daniel remained close friends, meeting regularly to share stories, reflect on life, and support each other through the challenges of aging. Though they came from different eras, their friendship was built on a foundation of mutual admiration and understanding. Jack often joked that Daniel was the grandson I never had, while Daniel referred to Jack as a living history book, a hero who taught me what it means to serve. Their partnership extended beyond personal connection. Together, they championed causes close to their hearts, dedicating themselves to supporting veterans and fostering a culture of gratitude. They traveled across the country, speaking at schools, community centers, and military bases. At every stop, they encouraged people to honor not just the fallen but also the living, those who carried the invisible scars of war long after the battles ended. One particularly impactful initiative they launched was called the Salute Project. The program aimed to bring together veterans and active duty personnel for open conversations about their experiences, struggles, and triumphs. It also provided resources for mental health support, employment opportunities, and housing assistance. What made the project unique was its emphasis on intergenerational connections, pairing older veterans like Jack with younger soldiers like Daniel to create mentorship bonds. These relationships helped bridge gaps between generations and ensured that lessons learned in the past were passed down to shape a better future. Their efforts didn't go unnoticed. Statues were erected in their honor, one near Buckingham Palace depicting the iconic salute, and another in Jack's hometown, commemorating his service and the ripple effect of that single moment. Schools began incorporating their story into curriculums, teaching students about the importance of remembrance, empathy, and breaking barriers to show compassion. Veterans organizations adopted the Salute Project model, expanding it globally and reaching thousands of individuals in need. Even as Jack aged, his spirit remained unyielding. He often said that meeting Daniel had given him a renewed sense of purpose. "When you've lived as long as I have, you start wondering if anyone remembers what you did, or if it even mattered," he once told a reporter. But seeing how much this story has touched people, it reminds me that our sacrifices weren't in vain. That's all any of us want, to know we made a difference. For Daniel, the experience transformed the way he viewed his own role as a soldier. No longer did he see himself merely as a guardian of tradition. He now understood that being a royal guard meant embodying the values of humanity, humility, and service. He rose through the ranks, eventually becoming a mentor to new recruits. His lectures always included a segment on the day he broke protocol to honor Jack, reminding them that rules exist to guide, not to limit. Compassion. As the years rolled on, Jack's health began to decline. Yet even in his final days, his mind remained sharp, filled with memories of camaraderie, sacrifice, and the friendships he'd forged along the way. When he passed away peacefully at the age of 92, surrounded by loved ones, the nation mourned the loss of a true hero. Tributes poured in from every corner of the globe, with many calling him the heart of a generation. At his funeral, a contingent of royal guards stood vigil, their rifles resting solemnly at their sides. As the final notes of "The Last Post" faded into silence, something extraordinary happened. Every single guard raised their hands in a synchronized salute, one last tribute to a man who had reminded the world of what truly matters. Though Jack was gone, his legacy endured. Through Daniel, through the Salute Project, and through the countless lives they had touched, his story lived on, a testament to the power of gratitude, connection, and the unbreakable bonds forged through service. And so, the salute that brought everyone to tears became not just a moment in time, but a timeless reminder of the best of humanity. The legacy of Jack Thompson and Corporal Daniel Hughes endured long after Jack's passing, growing into something far greater than either man could have imagined. Their story became a timeless reminder of the power of gratitude, respect, and human connection, a beacon of hope in a world often divided by differences. It wasn't just about two men exchanging salutes. It was about the values they represented and the ripple effect of their actions. Decades later, visitors to Buckingham Palace still pause to admire the statue erected near its gates. The bronze figures of Jack and Daniel stood frozen in time, locked in that iconic moment of mutual respect. Tour guides would point to the sculpture, recounting the story with pride. This, they'd say, is what happens when we choose compassion over convention. Flowers and handwritten notes were often left at the base of the statue, offerings from strangers moved by the enduring message of unity and honor. In schools around the world, the story of Jack and Daniel became a staple lesson in history and civics classes. Teachers used it to teach students about sacrifice, empathy, and the importance of remembering those who served. Students were encouraged to write essays or create art inspired by the moment, sparking creativity and reflection. One particularly memorable project came from a group of high schoolers in Canada who created a short film imagining what Jack and Daniel's lives might have been like before their paths crossed. The film went viral, reigniting global interest in their story and inspiring the new wave of tributes. The Salute Project, which Jack and Daniel had launched together, continued to thrive under Daniel's leadership. What began as a small initiative grew into an international movement, connecting veterans and active duty personnel across continents. The program expanded beyond mentorship and mental health support, incorporating educational workshops, job training programs, and even housing initiatives for homeless veterans. Thousands of lives were transformed through the project, each success story adding another layer to the legacy of that single salute. Daniel, now retired from the Royal Guard, dedicated his golden years to preserving Jack's memory. He traveled extensively, giving talks at conferences, universities, and military bases. His speeches always ended with the same heartfelt message: never underestimate the power of a simple act of kindness. That day, I thought I was honoring Jack, but in truth, he honored all of us by reminding us of what truly matters. Even pop culture embraced their story. Books, documentaries, and films brought Jack and Daniel's encounter to life for new generations. A major motion picture titled The Last Salute premiered to critical acclaim, earning awards for its portrayal of the emotional depth and historical significance of their meeting. Veterans organizations partnered with the filmmakers to ensure proceeds went towards supporting causes like the Salute Project, ensuring the story's impact extended beyond entertainment. Every year on Remembrance Day, crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace to pay tribute not only to fallen soldiers, but also to Jack and Daniel. Families brought their children, teaching them the importance of gratitude and remembrance. At precisely 11 o'clock a.m., a moment of silence was observed, followed by a ceremonial salute performed by the Royal Guards, a tradition inspired by Daniel's bold decision decades earlier. Though Jack was no longer there to witness these tributes, his presence was felt everywhere. His medals, carefully preserved, were displayed in a museum dedicated to veteran stories. Visitors often lingered in front of the exhibit, reading about his life and marveling at the courage it took to serve in a war-torn era. For many, Jack became more than a man. He became a symbol of resilience, humility, and unwavering dedication. As for Daniel, he carried Jack's spirit with him until his final days. When he passed away at the age of 85, he was laid to rest beside Jack in a quiet cemetery overlooking London. Their gravestones bore a shared inscription: "Through service, they united hearts. Through honor, they changed the world." And so, the story of the war veteran and the Royal Guard lived on, not just as a tale of two men, but as a testament to the enduring power of humanity. It reminded everyone who heard it that even in the smallest gestures, like a salute exchanged between strangers, there lies the potential to inspire, heal, and unite. Jack and Daniel had proven that true honor isn't bound by rules or traditions. It's defined by the connections we forge and the legacies we leave behind.